First, the High Court has sunk the government's much heralded Malaysian solution. By a majority of 6-1, the court found the Immigration Minister did not have the power to send asylum seekers to Malaysia for processing. So, as National Affairs editor Heather Hewitt reports, tonight the Gillard government's border protection plans are in tatters.
They've been in limbo for weeks since landing on Christmas Island, awaiting their fates. Now they won't be going to Malaysia or anywhere else anytime soon.
I certainly feel delighted for our clients who were very fearful of being sent to Malaysia. They were absolutely petrified of being sent there, very frightened. And we've spoken to them all today and they're extremely relieved.
Let's make no bones about it. Today's decision by the High Court is a profoundly disappointing one. Disappointing to the government, disappointing to me.
What we have seen today in the High Court is yet another recognition of yet another policy failure by this incompetent government.
We knew when the Malaysian solution was first announced by the government that it was wrong. The big question was whether it was actually legal. And the decision today from the court, not only is this harmful for children, not only is this expensive, but it's now illegal.
Whatever people in Australia might think of the asylum seeker debate, everyone in this country should feel a bit better tonight when they go to bed, because they know that standing between their freedom and the unchallenged executive power of federal and state governments stands the High Court.
Those asylum seekers in detention on Christmas Island, once destined for Malaysia, are reported by locals to be celebrating tonight. In Melbourne Chambers this afternoon, so too was the legal team that had pulled off a spectacular victory against the government.
I'm not even a lawyer.
And the fact that a group of the most vulnerable people in this country, almost made faceless by the government, can go to the High Court with some of the leading barristers and one of the top firms of solicitors in this country and fight out a case like this on a level playing field with the federal government with all its resources says a lot about our justice system.
The government's Malaysia solution has not only been tossed out by the High Court in a decisive 6-1 ruling, but its entire approach to asylum seeker boat arrivals is now in disarray. It's shell-shocked and clearly uncertain about what to do next.
The High Court has today applied a new test to how protection should be demonstrated. Of course, we respect the decision, but it is clearly a new test which had not previously been read into the Act.
What does this mean now for the government and its offshore processing solution?
It means that Australia has to comply with the protection obligations it has undertaken in the Refugees Convention as enacted by Parliament. And Parliament basically says that Australia's obligations under the Convention are to process refugees and give them protection as refugees if they satisfy the Convention test.
The High Court has found Malaysia does not satisfy the requirements of the Refugees Convention, and the government had breached the Migration Act in seeking to send asylum seekers to that country.
I think quite a remarkable decision by the High Court, and one in which the court is clearly indicating that they're taking quite a strict view in terms of interpreting the Minister's obligations, especially under the Migration Act.
It was wrong in terms of our convention obligations to refugees, and the High Court found it was wrong as a matter of law under the laws passed by Parliament. And the government has got a lot to answer to the people for making that many mistakes.
I'm proud of the policy. The policy is a good one. The policy is one which was designed to let us increase our humanitarian intake, stop people making that dangerous journey by boat to Australia.
There will be more boats now headed for Christmas Island, and the government knows it. One option it does have is to amend the Migration Act to try to keep offshore processing alive. But who knows how that would go in the unpredictable makeup of the current Parliament.
The government clearly cannot ignore the ruling, but the government can seek to circumvent the ruling by modifying the legislation, but that requires amendments to go before the Parliament.
There's nothing that the High Court said today that would prevent Parliament from laying down the rules and regulations for onshore or offshore processing, but politically the government is in a very difficult position, because basically what the moral issue is that's been created by the High Court's decision is that Australia, as a signatory to the Convention, has undertaken to provide protection obligations to refugees.
I have a responsibility to see this job through. It's a difficult job. It's perhaps, it would be fair to say, the hardest job I've ever done. But it's not a job I intend to run away from. I have obligations to the government and to the nation to see this issue through.
The job is about to get one hell of a lot harder. Today's decision and the court's interpretation of Section 198A of the Migration Act is not necessarily all good news for the opposition either. Its much vaunted Nauru solution could be in strife as well.
This clearly raises questions about the legality of a Nauru option, because the court has made it quite clear that they will look very closely at Section 198A declarations, and that is the only way that persons who come to Australia who are being relocated offshore for processing can be legally sent from Australia. So this decision by the court applies equally to the current government's position and the coalition's position if they were to ever come into government.
What we would now do is call on the government to move quickly to process the cases of these people rather than leaving them locked up in limbo.
The Cabinet will consider our overall policy settings, and of course that will have implications for those 330 people, and I will make further statements about that in due course.
The children of the latest boat arrivals on Christmas Island have been enrolled to start school from early next week. No doubt a welcome release. But for single men housed separately in the detention centre, there's no escaping images like this. For weeks now, one detainee has been sleeping in his own grave at night, as reported a few weeks back by this program. Here now is visual evidence passed on by those working inside.
When you give me an example of a man sleeping in his own grave, of course it's distressing that that's happening. I mean, I'm even told that people aren't even allowed to watch on television the news about their own case and what a successful outcome it is.
Tonight, an Immigration Department spokesman said those scheduled to be flown to Malaysia weren't allowed to watch TV when they first arrived on the island, but that's no longer the case. All have been told of today's historic High Court ruling.
I think this is probably the most significant of the decisions because it goes to the heart of basically a 10-year policy debate we've had in this country, starting with the Tampa, which of course only had its anniversary just last week, right up to today in terms of offshore processing of asylum seekers.
That report from Heather Ewart.